Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And it's our news unit for the month of May. And also, it happens to be our all-English unit. In this particular episode, we're going to be speaking entirely in English, and we're not going to let any Chinese slip through, even though I'm quite tempted sometimes to slip in a word or two of Chinese. But, hey, I guess we're supposed to not use Chinese today. And we've got a couple of news stories to talk about today.
We do. The first one's about a black box that is usually put inside airplanes so that if they have any sort of emergencies or problems, and heaven forbid they should have a crash, that this black box is sort of indestructible. And after that accident happens, those that are rescuing people or things from the plane can find that black box and maybe see what caused the plane to crash, or kind of the last moments before the accident happened. Well, they're actually going to be building a black box for the Earth, which I think is funny.
Kind of interesting, of course. Sometimes, of course, we see, what do they call those boxes they put into buildings or whatever to let people know what the time was about or what it was like when the building was constructed. Like, say, if it was built in 1900, they put a cornerstone in the building and then they put maybe a time box or something like that in there with things from that period of time so that when they tear down the building, they'll have an idea of what life was like then. I guess this is kind of a similar concept. And then also we're going to be talking about cigarettes in New Zealand. And I guess in New Zealand, they're thinking of banning cigarettes for future generations. If you want to whip out your cigarette and light it up and have a chat with your friends, well, eventually maybe in New Zealand that's going to be illegal. You might have to pay a fine or even go to jail. So we'll find out what these news stories are all about right now. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson and then we'll be right back. Earth's black box to tell story of our eventual end. Construction on Earth's black box is scheduled to begin this year in Tasmania, Australia. If the project goes as planned, future civilizations could theoretically study the factors that led to the collapse of our current society. The structure, a monolith constructed of thick steel, is meant to be indestructible. The solar-powered recording devices and internet connections stored inside will record two types of data. The first will be scientific measurements of the planet's characteristics, such as temperature changes, sea levels, and species extinction. The second will have a human context coming from news sources, social media, and key global events like climate change conferences. While the black box has yet to be built, the data is already being recorded. The team building the black box is now working on ensuring future civilizations know how to interpret the recorded data. This unusual monument is intended to outlive humanity and tell our story. The question is, who will read it?
New Zealand to ban cigarettes for future generations. New Zealand announced tough new restrictions on cigarettes in 2021. Under the new limitations, anyone born after the year 2008 will never be able to buy cigarettes in New Zealand. The restrictions will become law later in 2022 and will roll out in stages. First, lawmakers will reduce the number of locations where cigarettes can be sold from over 8,000 to under 500. A reduction of the nicotine content in cigarettes will follow. Finally, the minimum age to buy cigarettes will be raised annually until it covers the entire population. Currently, about 12% of New Zealand's adult population are smokers, with a number as high as 29% among the indigenous Maori population. The ultimate goal of the new measures is to bring the national smoking rate to 5% or lower by 2025. Many find the measures admirable, as they're certain to have positive impacts on the country's high rate of preventable death from cigarettes. However, critics argue that prohibiting cigarettes will lead us to a black market that could result in dangerous cigarette substitutes and destructive effects on legitimate businesses.
Okay, let's get to it, everybody. Let's discuss the contents of today's lesson. Our first story is about a black box for the Earth, and this black box will tell the story of our eventual end. So maybe we could require or could need, or maybe we could have had some information about civilizations in the past to know why they failed. Like, where the heck did those ruins in Peru come from at Machu Picchu? Nobody really knows much about them, but they're just there, and such ruins are all over the world. And wouldn't it be nice to have some kind of record as to what happened to them? Well, I guess someone is trying to solve this problem ahead of time to make sure that when we all disappear from the earth, future generations will know what happened to us.
So we've got the construction of this black box that's happening. They've actually scheduled it, and it's going to begin this year in Tasmania, Australia. So I guess maybe the Australians thought of this idea. I'd never heard of it before today. It's kind of interesting. Now, if the project goes as planned, future civilizations could theoretically study the factors that led to the collapse of our current society. So, like Tom said, if a society does just disappear one day because maybe they self-destructed or maybe there was a terrible accident on Earth, maybe a meteor hit them. We don't know how some of these civilizations disappeared or gone. Machu Picchu, which you mentioned, Tom, is pretty amazing. I mean, people love to go see those ruins up there on the mountains. But we don't have any record of why they no longer exist, what happened to those people. So it is kind of interesting that someone would think up this particular idea. And honestly, to name it a black box is clever.
Kind of interesting. Of course, as you said at the beginning of our program, black box is usually used to refer to some kind of box in airplanes. I guess it's actually orange and not black, but they call it a black box.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I think it's orange so that it can be spotted more easily on the bottom of the ocean or wherever if a plane crashes. But yeah, it's referred to as a black box, and it's got all the flight data so that people can figure out exactly what happened.
Records the pilots' voices as well.
Exactly. That it's a black box for the world so that future generations or aliens from other planets, when they come 1,000,000 years from now, they'll find out, gee, why did those humans disappear, as if anybody cares? Well, in any case, yes, the black box is going to be constructed in Tasmania, Australia, this year. So Tasmania is an island south of Australia. It's part of Australia's territory, but again, it's an island south of Australia, and it's known mostly in cartoons for the Tasmanian devil, although I understand that Warner Brothers' depiction of the Tasmanian devil is not exactly accurate.
No, but it's fun. And yeah, one of my best friends went to Tasmania and with the Peace Corps. And so we, of course, gave her lots of those Tasmanian devil stuffed toys. If you haven't seen it, just look online. You'll run across it. It's called the Tasmanian Devil. So it says here that if the project does go as planned, future civilizations that, of course, are alive after this one disappears that we're talking about, they could theoretically study the factors that led to the collapse. Theoretically just means they won't be able to study the actual civilization that disappeared because, of course, it's gone. But according to their theories, they could maybe learn a little bit if they had this black box with information that was stored inside. When you talk about the collapse of something, it means the destruction of something. It also means that something has fallen down. So you could say a building has collapsed, or maybe someone's so emotionally upset that someone collapses on the floor, collapses to the floor in tears and is sobbing, or the market could have a collapse where your stock market falls a lot, plunges. You could say the stock market collapsed today. So they wanted to have this black box to see if they could check out the factors, the reasons why this society actually disappeared or collapsed.
Okay, so that's for future generations, many thousands of years from now, after we all die out because of some kind of disaster or whatever. And the structure here in the next paragraph paragraph, the structure, a monolith constructed of thick steel, is meant to be indestructible. So a monolith is usually a large structure, and it's usually upright, like a block of stone or something like that. If you saw the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, there was a monolith in that movie that the monkeys all gathered around and started going crazy because it indicated the future or something like that. A big black slab, you could call it, and it's supposed to be indestructible. It cannot be destroyed, so it should be there for thousands of years, if not millions of years. And the solar-powered recording devices and internet connections stored inside will record two types of data. So inside this monolith are recording devices which are solar-powered, and then we've got internet connections in there also, which are also solar-powered, and they'll record some information or data. Data can also be read data. It's correct as well.
And the type of data that it's going to be recording will be, first, scientific measurements of the planet's characteristics. Characteristics could refer to features or qualities that something or someone has. Maybe you would describe your mom's characteristics as being lovable and kind and patient. And perhaps she's tall and has black hair like mine did. So the planet's characteristics would include things like, the temperature changes. Was it cold one year, a little bit hotter one year? Sea levels, if they're high or low, and species, the animals and the plants that are alive at that time, their extinction. If something goes extinct, it disappears from the earth. It no longer lives on the earth. It's gone.
Yep, it'll have all this information, the planet's special characteristics, like the amount of gases in the atmosphere and stuff like that, sea levels, and which animals all died out, which species went extinct. And the second will have a human context coming from news sources, social media, and key global events like climate change conferences and other types of information. So again, this is two types of data. The first one will be scientific measurements, and the second will be of a human context. So here we've got context, and that just means in this particular circumstances, in this area, which of course is unique to this particular situation. So yes, sometimes of course when you say something is in context, that means you're talking about a certain topic, and then sometimes people say, hey, you said this. Well, you took it out of context. I was saying that talking about this particular subject and not about what you're saying that I was talking about.
Yeah, that's really important to learn. I was taken out of context. Someone quotes you saying a particular thing when you weren't talking about that subject that they said you were. You were talking about something else. So moving on to the third paragraph, it says, while the black box is yet to be built, they haven't built it yet, the data is already being recorded. We know most of our lives are being recorded now because we're online and everybody is tracking you. So the team building the black box, that monolith, is now working on ensuring future civilizations know how to interpret the recorded data. Yeah, they'll probably look at some of this technology and think it's really behind the times, right? Kind of ancient, depending on how far along they progress after we disappear. If you interpret something, you can use this to explain the meaning of words, but you can also explain what a certain action means, or maybe someone makes a gesture towards you. You don't know how to interpret that. You don't know how to figure out or understand what they mean. That's another way to explain what this word interpret means.
Yeah, if you're a detective investigating a crime scene, you've got various clues. There's a discarded cigarette butt. There's some fingerprints. There's some DNA over there. So we've got these clues. But how do we interpret these data? How do we understand them? What do they mean? Does that mean somebody came in and killed this person? Where's the body, etc., etc.? So you have to interpret the data. And this unusual monument is intended to outlive humanity and tell our story. So it's going to outlive us. It's going to live longer than us. So eventually when we destroy each other with nuclear weapons or with diseases or whatever, or if there's an alien invasion and the aliens wipe us all out, sometime in the future when there's a new generation of people millions of years down the road, they'll see this black box and their questions about us will be answered if they're interested.
So this unusual unusual monument they're referring to. It's intended to outlive humanity, live past humanity. It will be surviving. It'll be in existence long after we're gone, and it will tell our story. The question is, who will read it? Who will be there to get that data, that information? Well, we're not going to say we're going to go to the Chinese teacher right now because we don't have one, but we will take a break.
All right, let's continue with our news lesson for the month of May. And we just got done talking about a black box that's going to be constructed, and it will be sent to Tasmania, or at least it will be constructed there to tell the story of humans to future generations once we're all gone. Now, the second story is about cigarettes. I smoked cigarettes many years ago. I was able to quit. Fortunately, I've been off cigarettes for more than 2 decades, actually. But in any case here, cigarettes tend to be a problem. Cigarettes are banned in restaurants, for example, here in Taiwan, or in public, I think. And now we're talking about banning them altogether, at least in New Zealand. So even if you want to smoke, even if there are designated areas, you won't be able to get the cigarettes in the future.
Yeah, they're actually talking about, they want to actually let cigarettes go extinct, you could say, just using that particular phrase. They've announced tough new restrictions. Of course, they refers to their government. They've announced tough new restrictions in 2021. So under the new limitations, anyone born after the year 2008 will never be able to buy cigarettes in New Zealand. So that kind of tells us that in 2008, you could say, anyone born after that year, you're not going to be able to get your hands on cigarettes. It's so interesting. I don't know currently what their legal age to smoke is. I think in America, what do you have to be 18 to buy cigarettes? I don't know, Tom. I never bought cigarettes.
It might depend on the state. But yeah, it's either 18 or 20 or 21. But of course, if you want to smoke, you'll figure out how to get the cigarettes from somebody.
Yeah, the law doesn't keep the cigarettes out of your hands, does it?
Although fewer and fewer people are smoking, so the amount of smokers is going down. I think ideally it would be best that people stop smoking on their own instead of having these restrictions. But I guess they're trying to discourage people from buying cigarettes in New Zealand there. And eventually they'll probably try to ban them altogether. Now, the restrictions will become law later in the year 2022, which is right now, and will roll out in stages. So here we've got the phrase to roll out, which means you introduce something slowly. You could actually roll something out literally if you're going to show someone a new model of car or something like that. So you have it behind the curtain, and then you roll it out. You slowly move it out from behind the curtain so people can see it, and then you unveil it or something like that. But here, roll out just means introduce. It will be introduced in stages, one by one, not all at once.
It's like saying you're going to launch a product. Now, when I first saw this roll out, I immediately thought of cooking or baking, where you have dough that you roll out and then you put it into shapes that you need. You might be making pizza. So you roll out the pizza dough and then you put the toppings on top. But like Tom said, here it refers to launching a new product, introducing a product into the market. So they're going to have this rollout in stages so that people aren't shocked all at once. It's not easy to quit smoking, from what I hear. I've talked to people. I have a friend who quits and then starts again and then quits. And so it's not easy. I'm with Tom. I don't believe government should be telling you what you can do and what you can't. But this is something, I guess, that they are able to go ahead with. We'll see if it lasts. We'll see if people start protesting when they really want to take all the cigarettes away. So first, these lawmakers, this is the first stage, they're going to reduce the number of locations where you can buy cigarettes. So right now, they've got 8,000 places all around New Zealand, and they want to reduce that to under 500.
If you're addicted to nicotine, of course, you need to go to some of those locations. They may be quite far away. And if you do go, hopefully they don't have restrictions on how much you buy because you might want to save up or something like that.
I bet they do.
But if it's going to be reduced to 500, then it's going to be even more difficult to find places to buy cigarettes. New Zealand isn't huge like Australia, but it's still pretty big. And you might have to drive quite a distance on the left side of the road in order to find those cigarettes. Now, a reduction of the nicotine content in cigarettes will follow. Now, of course, cigarettes contain what is called tar and nicotine. Nicotine is the stuff that you get addicted to. So they will reduce the amount of nicotine in cigarettes. So maybe people will lose their addiction to cigarettes and quit naturally. And finally, the minimum age to buy cigarettes will be raised annually until it covers the entire population. So the minimum age now might be 18 or 20, and they'll gradually raise it. It will go up and up, maybe to 22, 25 or whatever, until eventually it gets to be the age of 120, and nobody will be alive to buy cigarettes at that time.
So currently about 12% of New Zealand's adult population are smokers. That's really kind of low, actually. 12%. Yeah, I think more and more people have stopped smoking, not just because it's unhealthy, but because the taxes that the government have placed on cigarettes are crazy. I know in some cities in America, a pack of cigarettes with the taxes included is about $10, $10 US a pack. So it can be quite expensive to smoke. So we've got a number as high as 29% among the indigenous population there. And of course, it's the Maoris. They like to smoke. So this law sounds like it's kind of aimed at them rather than the entire country. So I'm sure they're not happy about this either. The ultimate goal of the new measures is to bring the national smoking rate to 5% or lower by 2025. And of course, in order to do that, the government's going to force you through these laws. So if you're talking about indigenous people, we've got indigenous peoples here in Taiwan. Those are the people that were naturally in this place. They're native to a place instead of people who immigrate into a country. The people that have been there a long time are indigenous. So we've got them having a much higher percentage. It's over twice as much as the rest of the adult population in New Zealand. Ultimate. What does ultimate mean to you? Well, ultimate could be different things. It can be the best. Ultimate frisbee is like the best type of frisbee to play. If one of your ultimate goals is accomplished, it means it's really your biggest goal that you've had, to accomplish in your life. The ultimate goal. So ultimate can also be the best, most extreme, or it can also happen at the very end. The ultimate part of the race was right before we reached Taipei 101. So that was the last portion of a race that happened in stages. So the ultimate in this way just means the last part.
Yeah, you could say the final goal of these new measures, what they eventually want to accomplish, is to bring the national smoking rate to 5% or lower in just 3 years' time by the year 2025. So that's their ultimate goal. And then after that, I suppose they're probably going to force everybody to quit smoking. And many find the measures admirable as they're certain to have positive impacts on the country's high rate of preventable death from cigarettes. It is true, smoking is a foolish thing to do, and it does cause lots of problems. You can get emphysema from smoking cigarettes. You can get lung cancer and all sorts of nasty afflictions. So yes, it is positive to try to reduce the amount of smoking in a population. Although, what are they going to do about the taxes if you don't have people smoking cigarettes and you can't tax a pack of cigarettes? Where's the government going to get the money?
They'll find something else to
There'll
tax.
be some other vice that people have that they can tax.
Or even good things. They put taxes on good things too, Tom. So it says here, however, critics argue that prohibiting cigarettes will lead to a black market. That often happens with, say, alcohol. They banned alcohol and liquor in the United States after the turn of the century, 1900s, and we had a black market that caused a lot of crime. So that's not good either. Critics are people who have things to say about something. It can be positive or negative. Usually it's negative. For example, art critics, restaurant critics, movie critics. That's a job you can have where you kind of an expert in that field and you tell people whether you think a piece of art is very good or a movie that you saw was good or bad. So critics can say positive and negative things. If someone says, oh, he's really a critical person, usually that describes someone who's always saying negative things to people.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's what the critics will argue. These are people who don't like this new legislation. They say that prohibiting cigarettes will lead to a black market, as you said. So, again, prohibiting, limiting, or restricting them, and that, again, could result in dangerous cigarette substitutes and destructive effects on legitimate businesses. Okay, so that is probably a legitimate criticism there. Like you mentioned, prohibition in the early 20th century in the United States. They outlawed alcohol or alcoholic beverages, but people still managed to find a way to get tipsy, to get wasted, get smashed and things like that. They had those speakeasies in big cities, in various places. So eventually the government realized that we can't control this stuff, even though alcohol is kind of terrible and there's drunk driving all the time and people getting killed because of drunk drivers. Too many people enjoy their alcohol, so they gave up in 1933. And now you can buy liquor and stuff like that in the United States. But in this particular case, people say that, hey, if you prohibit cigarettes, people will just buy them on the black market. They'll just buy them in secret places and they'll just keep on smoking no matter what the government does.
So this vocab word here, prohibit, is a verb. If you prohibit something, it's kind of the same as saying you're banning something. You're formally forbidding someone to buy something or say something. Smoking is prohibited. You'll often see that on signs if you're in an English-speaking country. But yeah, critics argue, this is their argument for not banning cigarettes in New Zealand. It could lead to that black market. And sometimes those black markets are much worse. We know from our experience in the United States that a lot of people died when alcohol was banned. Do you know the government was putting in poison in some of the alcohol to kind of discourage people, but it killed some people at the same time. People were making their own liquor that wasn't actually very good and healthy either.
Moonshine. Yep.
So, yeah, there can be a lot of unexpected tragedies that happen when governments try to control everybody. They have good intentions, but good intentions don't always lead to positive effects. So it could lead to some destructive effects on legitimate businesses. So there will be a lot of people put out of work. We have to remember those people as well, families. Maybe they don't make cigarettes, but maybe they have a business where they sell them. So it would impact a lot of people. So there are pros and cons on every side to this issue, I think we could say.
You guys can discuss this amongst yourselves as well and see if this applies to Taiwan. Should there be a ban on cigarettes in Taiwan eventually, or should there be government measures to encourage people to quit smoking? It's up to you. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher, not because it's an all-English lecture today. No Chinese teacher today, so you'll have to rely on your own intelligence to figure out what we just said. From all of us here at English Digest, my name is Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.